It was late afternoon when I found myself standing in front of my childhood friend's house, one I hadn't visited in years. The sun hung low, casting long, golden shadows across the faded brick and climbing ivy. The air smelled faintly of summer grass and something floral, almost nostalgic. My hands felt a little sweaty, even though I told myself it was just the heat. I wasn't sure what to expect anymore. My friend had always talked about his mom, Clara, as a warm, lively presence, the kind of woman who made a house feel like home. But now, after years away at college, the idea of seeing her again felt different. Like meeting someone I had thought I knew, only to find her changed. The door opened before I could knock. Clara stood there, framed by the soft glow inside. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few silver strands catching the light, softening her face. Her eyes met mine with that familiar warmth, but deeper, steadier, as if she had grown into a quiet strength I hadn't noticed before. "Look at you," she said with a smile, her voice low and soothing. "All grown up." She stepped forward, and before I could stop myself, she reached out and brushed a leaf off my shoulder. Her fingers were light, almost hesitant, but the touch sent a small jolt up my spine. I caught my breath, suddenly aware of how close we stood. The scent of her, a mix of vanilla and fresh linen, wrapped around me like a gentle comfort, but underneath it, I sensed something fragile, something unsaid. Then she laughed softly, a sound that felt like it came from somewhere deep inside her. "You're blushing already? How sweet." I tried to hide it, laughing along, but my cheeks burned anyway. It was a look I hadn't expected to provoke, especially not from Clara, the woman I'd known as my friend's mom, the one who always seemed untouchable in her quiet grace. We stepped inside, and the house smelled the same, but different, like memories wrapped in the faintest trace of lavender and old books. The walls held stories I hadn't heard yet. As she led me through the living room, her hand brushed mine once, just a momentary touch, but it stayed with me long after. Something about her calm presence, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, made me realize I wasn't seeing her through the lens of childhood anymore. There was a subtle shift, like the space between us was charged with a new kind of energy, quiet and patient. I wanted to ask her about it, to say something that could explain the flutter in my chest, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I just smiled back, feeling that strange mix of comfort and something else, something I wasn't ready to name. The next morning came quietly. The soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains, painting the kitchen walls with a pale gold. The house was still wrapped in a gentle silence, save for the faint hum of a kettle starting to boil. I found Clara already there, barefoot and casual, leaning against the counter as she prepared tea. Her presence was calm, effortless, like she belonged to this early hour, the way sunlight belongs to morning. She moved with a gentle grace, her bare feet making no sound on the cool wooden floor. I watched her reach for the teapot, her fingers lingering on the handle as if grounding herself in the ritual. "Want to help?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder with that same soft smile I'd come to recognize the day before. I nodded, stepping forward, eager for the excuse to stay near her. Together, we moved around the small kitchen, an easy rhythm between us, pouring water, stirring sugar, setting out mugs. The sound of the kettle's whistle mingled with the soft clinks of porcelain. We talked quietly, words floating lightly over the steaming tea between us. She asked about college, the struggles I never shared with my friends. Her eyes were patient, attentive, encouraging without pushing. In return, she shared pieces of herself, carefully chosen, like the steady drip of honey into her cup. She told me about her late husband in a way that didn't dwell on loss, but instead touched on moments of tenderness and quiet companionship. Her fingertips lingered on the back of my hand, soft and steady, grounding yet intimate. A smile played at the corners of her lips, gentle and knowing. "You're here," she said softly. It wasn't a question or an observation, just a quiet acknowledgement of the moment. I swallowed, trying to steady my breath. There was a subtle shift in the space between us, a fragile connection woven from something more than friendship or familiarity. But it was tentative, unspoken, as if both of us were afraid to give it a name. The day outside was waking up, the distant sound of birds and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Inside, the warmth of the tea spread through my fingers, mingling with the quiet heat of her presence. When my friend finally appeared in the doorway, the moment broke gently. Clara smiled at him with the easy warmth I remembered, and I stepped back, suddenly aware of the distance that had quietly crept between us. But the touch, the look, the softness in her voice, they stayed with me. Like a secret held quietly in the spaces between words, waiting for the right time to unfold. The sun was gentle that afternoon, slipping through the leaves in soft, golden patches as Clara and I stepped out into the garden. The air smelled of earth and fresh blossoms, a mixture of jasmine, rose, and something green and sharp that reminded me of spring rain. The garden was her sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow down, and for a while, I was allowed to step into that quiet world with her. We worked side by side, pulling weeds and tending the roses. She moved with a quiet confidence, sleeves rolled up to reveal skin sun-kissed and soft, a few freckles scattered across her forearms like delicate constellations. Her hands were sure and practiced, gentle but firm as they coaxed life from the soil. Every now and then, she'd glance over at me with a playful smirk, teasing about my awkwardness with the gardening tools. I caught myself smiling back, trying not to stumble over the small closeness growing between us. There was something about the way she looked at me, steady and curious, that made me forget how old I was supposed to be, how far apart our lives should be. At one point, she reached out to adjust the collar of my shirt, her fingers brushing lightly against the back of my neck. The touch was unexpected, soft, fleeting, but it sent a warm current racing down my spine. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and my breath hitched for a moment, caught between surprise and something more. She didn't pull away immediately. Instead, her fingers lingered a second longer, as if savoring the contact. The air between us felt suddenly charged, though we both kept working, words unnecessary. I tried to focus on the roses in front of me, but I couldn't help stealing glances at her. She was kneeling in the dirt, the sunlight catching the loose strands of her hair and making them shimmer like spun gold. Her face was peaceful, but there was a depth in her eyes, something I hadn't noticed before, a quiet strength mixed with a softness that made my chest tighten. I wasn't sure if she caught me watching her, but when she looked up, our eyes met. The moment stretched, thick and slow, like honey dripping. Her gaze was steady, unblinking, as if she was seeing me in a way no one else did. We both smiled then, small, almost shy smiles that held a world of things left unsaid. Suddenly, a splash of water broke the spell. I had accidentally flicked water from the hose, catching her on the shoulder. She laughed, the sound bright and spontaneous, and flicked a playful splash back at me. We ended up soaked from the waist down, standing close as the garden sprayed mist around us, droplets sparkling in the sunlight. I felt the warmth of her breath as she laughed beside me, and when her hand brushed mine while we both reached for the hose, the contact lingered just a moment too long. Neither of us said it aloud, but the silence between us said everything, a quiet acknowledgement of something fragile, tentative, and deliciously forbidden. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a friend's mom anymore. She was something more, someone who stirred a feeling inside me that I couldn't quite explain, but didn't want to let go. The afternoon sky darkened quickly, the soft light dimming as heavy clouds gathered overhead. We hadn't noticed the change until the first raindrops began to fall, slow and tentative, then quickly growing into a steady downpour. Clara and I found ourselves hurriedly retreating under the wide porch roof, the wooden beams creaking gently as the rain hammered the roof above us. The air outside filled with the fresh scent of wet earth, sharp and clean, mingling with the faint perfume of damp jasmine from the garden. The sound of the rain was loud, a constant rhythmic drumming that seemed to fill every corner of the quiet space we shared. The world outside had melted away, leaving only the soft patter of raindrops and the warm, sheltered silence between us. Clara fetched an old quilt from inside, a patchwork of faded colors and frayed edges, and wrapped it around both of us. Her bare feet rested against the cool wood of the porch floor as we sat close, the fabric a soft barrier between our skin and the chill in the air. The quilt smelled faintly of lavender and worn cotton, comforting and familiar. We didn't speak at first, simply listening to the rain and feeling the steady warmth of each other's presence. I could sense the quiet pulse of her breath, slow and even just inches from my own. Her shoulder touched mine lightly, a gentle weight that grounded me. After a moment, she began to speak, her voice low and thoughtful. She told me about the day she brought her son home from the hospital, the overwhelming mix of joy and fear, the uncertain hope she carried with her. Her words weren't heavy or mournful, but tender, like a secret shared in trust. I found myself leaning in closer, drawn by the softness in her tone and the way her eyes seemed to hold memories that hadn't faded. When she looked at me, there was a vulnerability there that caught me off guard, a quiet admission of loneliness I hadn't expected. Then she asked if I ever felt lost. I hesitated, but the truth spilled out. The nights when I felt too big for my own skin, the ache of being somewhere between childhood and the uncertain future ahead. I told her I did, more often than I liked to admit. Her hand moved then, slowly and deliberately, until her fingers covered mine. Her skin was warm against mine, the slight roughness of her palm grounding me. The touch was gentle but electric, a silent promise of understanding. We sat like that for a long while, hand in hand beneath the quilt, the rain falling around us like a private world. There was no need to speak. Her presence said everything. I felt a strange mixture of calm and longing, like the ache of something just out of reach. In that shared silence, something shifted. The distance between us seemed to narrow, drawn together by the simple, steady rhythm of two hearts quietly seeking connection. When the rain finally slowed and the clouds began to part, we remained wrapped in the warmth of the moment, reluctant to let go of the fragile peace we had found beneath the storm. The weekend had stretched out slow and heavy, like the silence before storm. My friend was away, giving Clara and me a rare privacy that felt both exhilarating and precarious. When she invited me to stay for dinner that evening, I knew something unspoken had shifted, something in the way she held her gaze, steady but gentle, that made the air between us hum with quiet anticipation. The power had gone out just before dinner, she said with a soft smile, lighting candles that flickered shadows across the walls. The room felt smaller, more intimate, the golden glow wrapping around us like a secret. The usual clatter of the kitchen was replaced by soft sounds. The scrape of a plate, the faint pop of the candle flame, the delicate rustle of her dress as she moved. We ate in near silence, the pauses between words filled with something electric. I could feel her eyes on me, but when I met her gaze, she looked away first, cheeks tinged with a gentle pink. The atmosphere was charged but delicate, like walking on a tightrope stretched thin between us. After dinner, we settled on the couch across from each other. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows over her face, her cheekbones sharp, her eyes warm and inviting. The distance between us felt smaller than it had any right to be, the space charged with all the things we weren't saying. Every small movement, her hand brushing the fabric of the couch, the way her knee angled toward mine, felt loaded with meaning. My own fingers itched to reach out, to bridge the gap, but I hesitated, held back by uncertainty and respect. Then she looked at me, her eyes holding mine with a quiet intensity that made my breath catch. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "You feel it too, don't you?" Those words hung in the air, fragile and weighty all at once. I want to say yes. I wanted to admit the longing I tried to bury. The way her presence had unsettled me, made my heart race in ways I hadn't expected. But the words caught in my throat, tangled with fear and doubt. So I stayed silent, letting my quiet answer speak louder than any confession. My chest tightened as she smiled gently, understanding without pushing. It was a smile that held compassion and a hint of something wistful, as if she knew this moment was both a beginning and a pause. She rose to make tea, breaking the tension, but leaving the room heavy with what remained unsaid. The faint clink of the teapot on the counter filled the quiet, while I sat still, heart pounding, replaying her words over and over. The candlelight flickered and danced, casting shadows that felt like echoes of the things we couldn't say aloud. I reached out instinctively, my hand hovering near hers before retreating, afraid of crossing a line that neither of us was ready to cross. That night, the air between us was thick with possibility, unspoken promises suspended just beyond reach. The almost confession lingered, a quiet tension that wrapped around us like the warmth of the candles, fragile but real. I realized then that this was the turning point, the moment when everything had changed, even if nothing was said outright. The space between us was charged, waiting for the next step, whenever that might come. Days passed with a gentle urgency, like the slow tightening of a rope pulled taut, but not yet snapping. Clara and I found ourselves slipping into a new rhythm, quiet moments that stretched longer, touches that lingered just a heartbeat too long. It was a dance on the edge of something fragile, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. One evening, the house was wrapped in the soft glow of twilight. The sky outside shifted from pale pink to deep indigo, and inside, the low hum of a jazz record played softly in the background. Clara was seated by the window, a book resting forgotten on her lap, her gaze distant as she watched the fading light. I sat nearby, the space between us shrinking as the silence grew thicker, filled with unsaid words and shared glances. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, a subtle heat that made my skin tingle beneath my shirt. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. My fingers lingered there, tracing the curve of her cheekbone with a tenderness I hadn't expected. She didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, leaning into the touch like it was something she'd been waiting for without knowing it. The room seemed to hold its breath. Our eyes met again, hers soft and searching, mine filled with a quiet longing. The air was thick with hesitation, yet something had shifted irreversibly between us. The tension that had been simmering beneath every glance, every light touch, finally broke through the fragile barrier we'd both been guarding. Her hand reached up, fingers trembling slightly, and found mine. Our palms pressed together, warm and steady, grounding us in the moment. The softness of her skin beneath my calloused fingers sent a shiver down my spine, and I could feel the rapid beat of her pulse under my touch. We sat there, hands intertwined, caught in the delicate balance of desire and restraint. There was no rush, only the slow, steady unfolding of something deeper, a quiet acceptance that neither of us could deny. Her voice was a whisper when she finally spoke, barely audible over the music. I never thought it would feel like this. I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, and replied, just as softly, neither did I. The vulnerability in her eyes made my heart ache. Here was a woman who had carried so much strength, now laying bare a tender fragility that only made me want to protect her more. The years between us seemed to dissolve in that quiet space, replaced by something far more profound: connection. For the first time, I dared to imagine what might come next, the possibilities unfolding like the gentle bloom of a flower opening to the sun. As the night deepened, the world outside faded away. There was only us, two souls meeting quietly at the edge of something precious, a slow-burning flame that promised warmth and light, if only we dared to nurture it. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. I woke to the quiet sound of Clara moving around, her presence gentle and familiar like the rhythm of a favorite song. The air smelled faintly of coffee and something sweet, freshly baked bread, maybe, that made the house feel like home in the truest sense. I lay still for a moment, the steady rise and fall of her breathing beside me grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. There was no rush, no need to fill the silence with words or grand gestures. just the quiet comfort of being close, the simple intimacy of shared space. As I watched her, I noticed the small details. The way her hair fell softly across her shoulders, the gentle curve of her smile as she caught my gaze, the way her eyes held a calm I longed to return to. She reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear, her fingers light and warm. The touch sent a familiar thrill through me, a reminder that this connection we'd built was real, fragile, and beautiful. Later, we sat together on the porch, wrapped in a soft blanket as the afternoon sun settled low in the sky. The garden was alive with the scent of blooming flowers and the distant hum of bees. Clara's hand found mine again, fingers weaving together naturally, a silent promise that this, whatever it was between us, was no longer tentative. We talked then, honestly and openly, our voices soft but steady. She shared fears and hopes I hadn't seen before, and I told her about the parts of myself I'd kept hidden. The uncertainty of youth tempered by the pull of something unexpected and profound. There was laughter, too, light and easy, breaking through the vulnerability like sunlight through leaves. It wasn't perfect, nothing about our connection was, but it was real, and that made all the difference. When my friend came home that evening, the dynamic shifted naturally, not with awkwardness, but with a new understanding. Clara, my friend, and I, there was space for all of us. Respect and care threaded through every glance and word, building something richer than I'd imagined. That night, as I lay beside Clara once more, I realized the story we'd started was not about the boundaries society might place on us, but about the quiet courage to embrace unexpected love. It was about moments, small touches, lingering looks, shared silences, that wove two lives together with gentle patience. Her fingers traced patterns on my arm, slow and deliberate, as if engraving the memory into my skin. I felt her heartbeat, steady and sure beneath my palm, and in that warmth, I found a home I'd been searching for all along. The age between us no longer mattered. What mattered was the honesty, the respect, the deep well of affection that had grown quietly, steadily between us. As the night deepened and the house settled into stillness, I knew this was only the beginning. A slow, beautiful journey marked by trust, tenderness, and the unspoken promise of a love that didn't need to rush. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen, truly known, truly home.